Today we're going to be talking about the biggest mistake I made when I self-published all of my books. And this is a mistake that I feel like I've really only wrapped my head around in the past, couple of months. So sometimes it takes years of publishing experience before you feel like you've got stuff figured out. My name is Mandi Lynn. I make weekly videos on the business of being an author, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a new upload. So here's what I used to think were big mistakes when self-publishing books. I used to think that the biggest mistake you can make is hiring a bad editor or designing a book cover that doesn't fit the genre, because let's face it, if you design a bad book cover, you can always change the book cover down the line. Same with, having a book with typos. You can always fix the typos. And then another mistake is, spending too much during the publishing process. There's a lot of mistakes that you can make when self-publishing, but I feel like there's one big overarching mistake that I've made, that I've kind of learned, and it's something that I think all authors tend to learn slowly. And even if I tell you about it now, it's not quite something you can wrap your head around the importance of until you're in the publishing industry, and then one day something will just click, and then you're like, oh, I get it now. So what mistake am I talking about? I'm talking about publishing a book and not writing to market. Now, writing to market is something that I've heard of for years. So I was not blissfully unaware. I was aware that was a thing for a very, very long time. But the difference is I decided I didn't care. When I first started out as an author, I just wrote what I loved. That's what you're supposed to do. And I genuinely think that's probably how everyone should start their author career anyways, even if you never publish anything. As long as you're writing and you're loving the process, that's all that matters. Because if you go into writing and starting your author career from a business perspective of I need to write to market, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to feel restricted. So while I feel like I've made mistakes in my author career, I know that as an author, it was necessary for me to just write what I want to write. So then later down the line, as I developed my career, I could figure out, what I was supposed to do. Let's talk about these 3 books right here. These are the first 3 books that I ever published. We have my debut novel, Essence, my second novel, I Am Mercy, and then my third novel, She's Not Here. So Essence is truly, even though it's my debut and it's so different from what I write now, I will always have a special place for this book in my heart, because it is the essence of what I call writing what I love, or at least writing what I loved at the time. I was obsessed with young adult fantasy when I first started writing, hence writing a young adult fantasy. And then I wanted to give a backstory to that story. So I went ahead and I wrote a prequel, which is I Am Mercy, and it explains how all the magic came to be in that book. And honestly, I had a great time writing it. And then as I grew up, I started reading thrillers, and I became obsessed with them. And I was also working at a hospital at the time, so hence how I came to publish a psychological/medical thriller. I know, weird. One of these things is not like the other. But the point I'm trying to say is that these books, while I was hopping genres, because I Am Mercy is a historical fantasy technically, so I've got 3 completely different genres going on. They helped me hone my craft as a writer and learn different writing skills, even though they were all in very different genres. So these books, while I honestly don't really promote them or sell them anymore because they don't represent me as a writer anymore, they are extremely important in my author career, because without these books, I would not be where I am today. So eventually I started to kind of hone into what writing I wanted to do, which is where Meet Me at the Summit came in hand. Meet Me at the Summit is a young adult contemporary romance, and then I wanted to give it a sequel, which is where Let the Rubble Fall comes in, again, a young adult contemporary romance. These books also have very strong coming of age elements in them. And then hence my most recent novel, The Trail to You and Me, which is a true young adult romance. It's truly just about the romance, whereas the other two have a really strong coming of age element in it. This, of course, is coming of age because it's young adult, but it's mostly romance and it's clean romance. So the more writing I've done, the more I've started to realize that these books are the types of books that I want to write going forward. And it just made me realize, like, oh, this is writing to market now. The more you research about writing to market, the more you realize that books that sell and sell well sell for a reason. Whether that be the genre of the book or the tropes that are in the books. Hence why when Twilight was a craze, there was a lot of other fantasy romance books being published at the same time that were kind of like dupes of Twilight. And even though all the books were very similar in terms of the story and the themes, we all still read them and were obsessed with them and loved them anyways, even though they were like basically a copy and paste version of the same book. That is an example of writing to market. Now the words writing to market make it sound very boring and very dry, but it's actually extremely important because, again, books sell for a reason. If you want to make a career out of selling books, you really have to hone in on writing to market. I used to think that the more unique a book was, the better the book is. So that's why, especially with new writers and authors, you'll see when you ask them, like, what genre is their book, they'll give you, like, oh, it's romance meets historical meets dystopian, and it's just this mishmash of genres. And it has no concrete spot on a bookshelf at a bookstore for that reason. And it may feel cool as an author to be like, oh, I was able to blend all these things together, but it makes it really hard to sell when you have lines that are blurred that much. The longer you go in your career as an author, the more you'll learn that readers devour books that they are familiar with. What I mean is, readers that read like 2 or 3 books a week are readers that read basically the same type of book. You may get the oddballs who love reading across all different genres, but most readers have a small selection of genres and tropes that they really love, and those are the books that they just read over and over again because they love them for a reason. So why bother trying to read other things that you know you may not like anyways? So that's why unique isn't always better. Sometimes it's better to just go with the market trends and go with what readers are reading and obsessed with. And I know, especially as a new author, this is something that's really hard to let go of. I've talked to so many authors, and especially the new ones, who are like, oh no, my book will do really well because it's so unique. And yes, unique is good, but sometimes it's really hard to sell. We all are limited on our time, and when you can only read a finite amount of books, sometimes readers are less inclined to take a bet on a book that seems a little obscure to them, and they'd rather turn to the book that is the same genre and same tropes that they're used to and they know they already love. Years and years ago, when I think I only had 1 or maybe 2 books published, I did a writing conference, and all of us authors were sitting at a table and doing like a Q&A section, and we were all introducing ourselves. And one of the authors on the panel with me introduced herself, and she was a romance author, and she had published like 20 books. As you can imagine, me, who was like maybe 18 or 19 at the time, was like, holy crap, how do you publish that many books? I had spent 3 years publishing Essence, I believe another 3 years publishing I Am Mercy. I was just like, 20 books? What the heck? And the author that was sitting next to me, I think he saw the shock on my face and was just kind of like, don't worry, all of her books are the same. And I didn't really get what he meant at the time until I realized, like, oh, he's talking about their romance books. And basically insinuating, because they're romance books and they have romance tropes and genre expectations as a romance, romance books tends to follow like a kind of formula, like whether it's purposeful or not. That's just how romance books tend to go. And so for that reason, he was kind of insinuating like, don't worry, she doesn't work as hard as the rest of us because she's a romance author. All of her books have the same plot. Was kind of what he was insinuating. And that's not the first time or the last time I've heard of authors kind of insinuating that romance authors don't work as hard because they don't have to come up with unique storylines. Now that I'm older and I understand writing to market more, I'm just like, oh, buddy, you didn't understand. She's figured the formula out. She's published 20 books and is making bank on it, while we've published 1 or 2 and are definitely not making bank on it. Because let's face it, as authors, publishing 1 or 2 books is not going to make you a living. In order to make a living as an author, you have to publish a lot of books. Because think of it this way, if you have only 1 or 2 books published, you have to sell hundreds of copies of that book every month to get a decent paycheck. Whereas if you have a bunch of books published, you only have to sell a couple copies of each book each month to get a paycheck. And especially if you're an author that writes in a series, well, then there's a formula for success, because if people love the first book and they love it, they're going to move on to the rest of the books in the series, hopefully. So if you're open to the idea of writing to market, because I know that sometimes I guess this can be controversial, and I can understand why, because we all like to think unique is better, but if we're looking at this from a business standpoint, sometimes unique is not always better. But if you're willing to hear my advice, here's my advice. Find your genre and stick with it. That's why I actually started my new pen name. So originally I published my books under Mandi Lynn, but now for my fiction books, which will be, clean romance books, are going to be under the pen name Mandi Lynn Bell, because this is a brand that I am creating for myself now. So I've created this brand and now I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to genre hop anymore. I've written in multiple other different genres. When I publish under the name Mandi Lynn Bell, you bet it's going to be a clean romance book. If you do want to continue to write in multiple genres, that's where having multiple pen names come in hand. So like Mandi Lynn is where I publish my nonfiction books now, and Mandi Lynn Bell is where I publish my fiction books. Another great thing you can do if you really figure things out is the faster you can publish a book, the better. And that's not to say quantity is better than quality, but that is to say that when you really hone into your genre and into your audience, readers will want to devour your book. So let them devour your books. Once they read one book, give them another book to read. And do it before they forget who you are. That way they stay obsessed with you, obsessed with your books, and they continue to buy. And again, this goes back to it's way easier to make a living as an author the more books you publish. Also, make sure that you meet genre expectations. So with every genre, there's different expectations for a reader. The most common example is with romance. If you're writing in the romance genre, you have to make sure that your book ends with a happily ever after. If it doesn't end with a happily ever after, it's not a romance, so don't call it a romance. Doing research into what your genre expectations are is imperative in order to have satisfied readers when they read your book. Also, make sure to read in your genre. Whatever genre you choose as your niche as an author, make sure you read in that genre, because genres have trends and they change and shift slightly, and you will feel more inspired as an author if you stay in the world of your genre. So for example, even though I love reading thrillers still, I don't write in thrillers anymore. So while I'll continue to read thriller novels for the joy of it, I will mostly read romance novels because those are the genres that I write in, and that's where I want to stay inspired by. If you want more info on learning to write to market, make sure you check out the book, Write to Market by Chris Fox. Highly recommend it. It's also a pretty short book, so you'll be able to get through it relatively quickly. Honestly, probably within a day if you got the time. And I feel like there's a lot that can be said about writing to market, and this is just the start of it. But I feel like since I've had this epiphany where I realized I need to start a new pen name, which also meant starting a new newsletter, it meant starting a new social media account, I just feel like I've been more aligned to my goals as an author and my goals for my long-term career as an author. And it feels like it's really been a game changer. And I hope as time goes on, I can continue to share how and why it's been such a game changer for me. But this is really the starting point, is just understanding why writing to market is important. And it's not something you should kind of just turn your nose up at and be like, I'm better than that. I'm going to write unique and I'm going to make money that way. Because I think there is a time and a place for that, but it's something that's more of a unicorn situation. It's not common. So the easiest way, I guess you could say, to make money as an author is learning to write to market and fully embracing writing to market. That's not to say it's impossible to make money without writing to market, and that's not to say that writing to market is the easy way out, because by no means is any of this easy. I'm just saying you're more likely for success if you write to market. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are on writing to market in the comments down below. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week.